Which Florida State receivers lead the way in 2024?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into another episode of Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Today's episode is going to be a fun one because we're going to talk about the passing game and the big plays and explosiveness that the Noles can have. Today is going to also be an opportunity to discuss many different players because there's a lot of opportunities. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe, and share this podcast. We are available wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. Part of the awesome Locked On Network, your team every day. So let's jump right into it here. We're going to get a lot of things in order really quick, but spring ball is important, right? It's really important to get everything organized and everybody on the same page. You have your one or two key guys. Oh, wait, Florida State doesn't have their one or two key guys. So that's something to think about. I want you to put through your mind here just for a second. Which player would you rely on right now in any big moment against any big team for Florida State at wide receiver that is proven? Proven. That's something to think about because honestly, right now, I'm not sure there is an answer for that, and that's why this episode is so important. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, make every moment more. New customers join today and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So first off, before we dive into which players can start, which players can move around, maybe play multiple roles, etc., I will get into all of that. You still got to bring up the obvious. Keon, Coleman, and Johnny Wilson are gone. And as we get close to spring ball opening up for the Noles, I've went through a million different scenarios, talked to numerous people, and I've gotten a conundrum of a zillion different answers. So it really is subjective on the depth chart, but these two things are not. Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman were elite. Their stats stand out, and I'm just going to read them off just for the remembrance of what they did for Florida State in 2023. 91 receptions, 1,275 yards, 13 touchdowns. Key moments were also a part of that. The yardage really isn't as high as you might think, but both of them missed a lot of time last year being banged up. And I don't think Keon was healthy for about 85% of the season. He wasn't the same after game 2 or 3. But at the same time, they still were really impactful in many different ways. So LSU game in particular, Keon was the best player in the field by a landslide. Can he be that in the NFL? We'll find out. But today we're just talking Noles. So losing him changes your run game. It changes who blocks. You got a 6'4", 215 guy out there. That's the smaller receiver. Then you got Johnny Wilson, who I just did a podcast on earlier this week. 6'6" and 3/8, 231 pounds, running a 4.52, 37-inch vertical. Yeah, that's kind of impressive. 10.8, I believe it was, in the broad jump. I mean, he is a very unique player. Oh, by the way, 84.5-inch wingspan, the longest NFL history for a player at his position. This is a unique scenario that Mike Norvell and the entire Florida State staff, not just offense, but the entire staff has to figure out. Offense will bounce ideas off the defensive staff in any coaching room, and they should. How do you replace these guys? Obviously, it's going to be collective, but how do you do it? We're going to talk about players and how they end up on the depth chart, the different packages like 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. You've got 10 personnel, 1 running back, no tight ends, and we're just going 4 wide. Whatever it may be, there's different things to talk about. So number one, here's my first prediction for today. If you take nothing else away from this podcast, note the following. Florida State's wide receiver depth chart will be changing nonstop from this point, and probably already has, all the way through the 2024 season. There'll be a couple guys that probably emerge here and there for stretches, but until otherwise proven, again, I am predicting that the depth chart will constantly change. A lot of talent, but it's very unproven. And that's why I started this podcast with that question. Who would you rely on right now in a big game that's proven already at Florida State? There isn't an answer to that. There's some guys that have played, but I'm talking about proven in like they've been the dude. We just talked about the 2 guys that left. Those were the 2 key guys. Going to talk a little bit about tight end as well. Losing Jaheim Bell doesn't help either. These are difficult situations to take on in any given year, especially when you combine them all together. But here is my best guess based on some of the production, some of the players they have coming back. Again, I've talked about receivers a little bit already heading into spring, but it's such a big topic. I wanted to hit it again a little more specific. I'm going to go Malik Benson just because he's a speed guy and he's played at Alabama. He's seen big games. He's going to be one of the starters. I think he'll play outside at the flanker spot. Destin Hill will compete for, but I think Ja'Kai Douglas, at least to start the year, will be the slot receiver. Watch out for Brown. That's the kid came in he's from Miami originally, but he played at LSU last year. He transferred to Florida State. He's a candidate as well. But Ja'Kai Douglas is my pick. He had the big game against Pittsburgh last year. At least one game he was really good. I believe it was 115 yards receiving. That's important. And then you're going to look outside. This is the one that is really difficult. I don't know if you're going to find many guys that have kind of waited their turn more than Kentron has. I'm going to give him the nod. Hakeem has more talent upside, in my opinion. Guy like Deuce Spann, maybe he could be out there. He's one of the wild cards I'll talk about as well. But again, right now I'm going Ja'Kai Douglas in the slot. I'm going to go Malik Benson at flanker. And out wide, I'm going to go with Kentron. I don't know if that will stick for very long. And through spring, just historically speaking, college coaches like to mix it up to flat out make it difficult on their quarterbacks because they know during a game, you can't predict injuries. You can't do it. And you can't predict when a guy just has a crappy day. He's got the dropsies. You got to rotate guys in and out. So they'll start a guy for 2 or 3 practices, and they'll mix a guy in. So that's why I keep going back to, I think this will be a rolling depth chart. It's not necessarily a bad thing because like a guy like Deuce Spann probably isn't going to get a lot of discussion. But if he ends up being a player that the Noles end up using a lot in just 2 or 3 games, he might be the reason they win a ball game that otherwise they wouldn't. Having a guy like him that's athletic and can really run. I remember seeing him in high school play at Lakewood in St. Pete. That's unique. Most teams would like to have him in starting role contention. Not many people are predicting that. Why not? So again, this is a possible situation where each week a slot could change. The outside guy, maybe Hakeem has a great week and he beats out Kentron Poitier. I don't know. But I just do know that there's going to be some change. Now, how do these roles work in conjunction with the important part of depth chart packages, etc.? That's what I'm going to talk about next. And to be honest with you, this is why depth chart, just the name of it historically, is not that important. More important is how you fit in to whether it's 10 personnel, 11 personnel, whatever. If a guy has a niche that he does really well playing in the slot, if there's a tight end in the game compared to playing flanker in another situation, whatever. Guys are going to move around. Norvell's done a good job. Like he could put Keon in the slot last year, but he was probably a better outside receiver. Doesn't mean he can't play it. That's something else to think about. That's next here at Locked On Seminoles. eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or dive alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. Now, let's talk situations. If you're playing a team that has smaller corners, there could be a lot of different ways to get some of these guys on the field. You know, they might even use somebody like, well, Wayne McCoy is a freshman. That's somebody else. We haven't even got to them yet. Talk about them a little bit more in a podcast coming up. But how do you use different packages in combination with certain players based on the personnel you're going against? You're going up against a couple 5'10" corners. Okay, there's nothing wrong with starting Malik Benson, but again, a guy like Deuce Spann, Hakeem Williams, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" kind of guys, maybe you go with that. Florida State has opportunities to throw down the field. Obviously, DJ Uiagalelei has a cannon for an arm if you've ever seen him play. Trust me. He's the kind of guy that comes in throwing 97 in the ninth inning for a baseball team. They're not going to have a problem getting the ball down the field. They also could have the opportunity to throw jump balls. The other part with this, and this is the one thing I have heard consistently from those who cover Florida State, fans, and just my own personal expectation, the running game should be pretty good next year, even though they lost a guy that just ran 4.39 in the combine. Shout out to that young man. Florida State's depth chart at running back is better than many think, though. I don't think you're going to see Florida State's running game drop off that much. I really don't. And because they have the system in place, they've shown effectiveness with it. And I know that you're not going to replace an elite runner at quarterback, but DJ is good at it. He's good. He's just not got a lot of wiggle. He's going to run over somebody. You combine that with the running backs, the only thing left is how do you block on the perimeter? I think bigger receivers are going to be a part of that too. So again, the teams you play is very important. Here's a scenario that I think is going to play out quite a bit. Ja'Kai Douglas, again, I think at least early on will be your slot, and that's fine. You put him at one slot, but you could also go deuces, meaning two to each side, or call it twins, whatever you want to call it, two slot receivers. Sometimes the second one might be somebody that's a bigger guy. I'll talk about Kyle Morlock here in a little bit as the tight end. That's a big part of the offense too. They used a lot of 12 personnel last year, one running back, two tight ends. Florida State's depth chart at tight end is nowhere near as good as it was last year on paper. So maybe he comes in and plays tight end a little bit less, but maybe he's the other one. But against a team that doesn't have many quick defensive backs, you might go Ja'Kai. And then you could put somebody like, well, why not? Well, Wayne McCoy, maybe he plays some of those reps. There's other guys too. I mean, my list is long. Vendravius Jacobs, he's not somebody that's very fun to cover in the slot. Nobody's talking about him. They should. He has athleticism and he has the quickness to make guys miss. There's Destin Hill. You could put Hakeem in the slot if you wanted. He's twitchier than people think. That's 6'3", 215 pounds. They have a lot of different ways to do that. So again, the depth chart is not about, okay, here it is. This is just how it works. 30 years ago, there was some truth to that, but not now. And here's the other part with it. I think that at some point, especially in a bigger game, whether it's Florida, whether it's Notre Dame, whether it's Miami, whatever, you will even see some of these receivers do any of the following, if not a combination of them. Start out on the slot in a play, go in motion, be in the backfield, or vice versa. Run behind them, throw swing passes to them, all those different things. There isn't a depth chart spot for that because when the play starts, they're not really in position. They're in motion. So where you start at on that play is not really that relevant. It's where you are when the ball is snapped. This offense, based on how Norvell has shown it to date, is very flexible. That's why not having a ton of experience, while not optimum, obviously, is still not as bad as you might think. Teams that rely on this is what we do, we're just going to execute, they would struggle more than likely, a little bit more than what Florida State probably will this next year in the passing game to create big plays, especially because everybody kind of does the same thing over and over. After the film's out, after game 1 or 2, it's going to be rough. They're going to know your tendencies and it's difficult. Florida State will be able to adapt game to game. Like I just mentioned a minute ago with the smaller corners, they'll be able to put out guys. Okay, if you want to put 5-10 kids out here, that's cool. But we're going to go with bigger receivers today for more of the snaps, maybe start, maybe not, and create some mismatches. And that's going to give us an edge in the run game with bigger guys trying to block your smaller corners. Florida State's got a bevy of options and a bevy of talent. Do you want a surprise? Somebody who might come out of the woodwork? There's a couple of possibilities. But I'm going to go with Jaylen Brown. I mentioned him briefly. He was one of the kids. He's one of the fastest players I've ever seen in high school football. He run by guys like they were standing still. I saw a game against Bishop Moore when his high school squad from Miami came up and just annihilated them. This is a team that has the speed on the edge that can give you some problems when you put guys like Douglas in the slot, Brown in the slot, Brown can play flanker too. When you do that and you mix and match where they line up, and this part of this isn't on Norvell, it's that these kids have to learn the playbook. That's the part nobody knows. But assuming they can play at least a little bit in multiple spots, move them around, they are going to create a lot of mismatches. And technically, just based on what I've seen over the last 5-10 years in college football with all these spreads, when you move guys around, people get confused in the secondary. The guy can run the worst freaking route in the history, man. It doesn't matter when the guy's wide open because there's a bust. When you create confusion in the secondary, touchdowns happen. I think Florida State will hit as many big plays based on that as they will with their ability to be congruent between the quarterback and the receivers this next year. I could be completely wrong, but when you run motion like I talked about, guys running behind the running back, different things, and they understand what they're doing, the timing, where to line up, all that, again, that's all important to get in spring. It's 15 practices. Honestly, it doesn't even remotely touch what they need. They need conservatively 30. That'll never happen, but they're still going to work on it through summer and into fall camp too. I think they're going to create a lot of mismatches just with their quickness and speed. Jaylen Brown's just the example that I'm going to use because I know him from the high school ranks. And to be honest, he's a burner, man. You put him out there next to Benson, like Malik can really go. Him and Jaylen be a heck of a race to watch. Then you got Ja'Kai. Then maybe you put Morlock as your inline tight end or in the H-back, whatever. You can do in any combination. You put teams in a lot of really difficult situations. It's not fun. Do I think this group collectively, by the end of this next season, here's another question. By the end of the season, again, if you take nothing else away from this, this is going to be a rolling depth chart. I'm just going to keep saying that. But by the end of the season, do I think they'll have at least a pretty good idea getting in closer, like the Notre Dame game or whatever, late October, early November? Okay, these are the things we do best. We might have a few nuances for a big game like UF, but this is what we do. We're good now. Yes. I think the first 6 games will be feeling it out because no matter how much you practice, it is not the same thing as live action. When the football is in the air, you still got to make plays when the camera's rolling. That's a little bit different. Some kids do well with that, some don't. So we'll have to figure that part out too. But that also leads to the final point, and that's pairing the wide receivers with a difficult situation at tight end, in my opinion. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On because it is the final part to whether or not Florida State's passing game can be explosive and the depth chart's going to work out. And it could dictate whether or not more of the receivers play. You may see more one running back and no tight end or one running back and just one tight end than there were last year by a lance. It could be 20, 30% different next year, depending on how this next part goes to this show. All right. Fire TV. I'm somebody that's used Fire TV for years. I've got the adapter. I just hooked it up. I just moved and I just set up a new TV. It's easy. It's an app that sits right there on your smart TV and you go to it. And then it's just everything that you have saved. You can organize it by channel in terms of alphabetical. You can prioritize it. If you wanted something like ESPN or CBS or whatever at the top, it's easy. I will always use Fire TV because I don't like to change, and they made it easy for me. At the very top of it, when you first log in and you go to the top screen, they get used to what you go to. There'll be 3 or 4 channels you go to all the time, and then you can also just go to live TV as well. Also, they've added something that's a little bit different. You can just go, Alexis, play Fire TV channels, and it'll bring up different types of opportunities for you if you want to watch sports or whatever, their own set. So there's a lot of different ways you can benefit from this, and it's pretty cheap, to be honest with you. I don't think there's any reason for me to change, and I've, again, used it for I don't even know how many years, like 7, 8 years I've been a part of this. I think it's a great way to do it, and it sure beats these ridiculous cable bills. My dad's paying over $200 right now, and I'm like, you got to get rid of that, dude. That's utterly ridiculous. But to each their own. So for me, Fire TV, no matter how you use it, is an easy way to go. Finally, let's talk a little bit about the tight end position. Morlock's going to be the starter, but what did they lose? They lost Biscuit, their power tight end guy, and I mentioned that a minute ago. You're going to see Wes Losing him, he's 280 or whatever it was, 285. He transferred to Arizona State. You lost Jaheim Bell. That's a lot of talent. Okay, that's a lot of talent. And for the wide receiver room to flourish, tight end's got to block. Now, I'm not just talking about pass protection. I'm talking about 1st and 10. We're running the ball. They put the receivers in a good spot where you get to 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4s, play action, etc. The tight ends are going to be a big part of it, even when it's not a passing down. And even when it's not expected, if Florida State runs the ball as good as I think they will, again, that's just my opinion. I think that the running back room will take care of itself. Even a guy like Samuel, who didn't get a chance to play much last year, they've got guys. They'll be fine. But the tight end could be the last guy on that edge on an outside zone or toss sweep or whatever. If he seals his man, you give somebody like, Singleton or any of these guys a chance to hit the corner, they can go to the distance. And they can at least move the chains, creating more opportunities for the passing game. And that brings us to this. Can Morlock be a consistent blocker? Can he also do it when it's not just 1st and 10 early in the game? Can he play more reps? Because they don't have much depth. I'm not going to get into a ton of it, but I mean, who do they really have that you go, this is, again, not just a good player, but an experienced one? They don't. It is not as good a situation, just looking at it on paper, as you might like. Now, they brought in what I think is as good a tight end as there was in the country. I remember saying him in 9th grade and saying, I'd take him right now. And that's Landon Thomas from Colquitt County. 6'4", 6'5", 235 to 240 pounds. He is a tremendous pass-catching tight end. I'm not sure how much he's going to help in the blocking game, but we'll see. They've got a few other guys like Jackson West. I mean, he didn't play a ton last year, but maybe he can be a considerable piece. Maybe he's the guy, at least coming out of spring, it's the backup. But they need somebody else to step up as well. Maybe this is something they annihilate in the spring transfer portal and they bring in 2 guys. I have no idea. But I think at least one is the best thing. 2 would be annihilating the competition if they could get 2 quality tight ends, but there aren't many of them. The final part to that, though, who's catching the ball if it's not Morlock? Is Landon going to be able to come in the game and not give it away that it's a pass because he's a freshman? Most freshman tight ends are terrible at blocking. Is he going to be able to do that? He's already met with the media and everything around Florida State, and he's, a positive kid. He was always nice with me when I talked to him. But I mean, for the love of mankind, it's a freshman at a spot where you got to take on grown men. That is very difficult. And if he comes in only on passing downs, that gives it away. So I'm a little bit skeptical about tight end right now, and that could be the difference to whether or not Florida State's passing game is able to be a big play passing game. The speed and athleticism on the outside is there. That is unquestioned. But if you're not run blocking well at tight end and helping the run game and getting into positive passing situations, it mitigates your talent. Even Hakeem one-on-one, if they know it's a pass, it's easier to cover him. All of these things come in together. So to kind of wrap up and to summarize here, this is a conundrum for me, and it has been for everybody I've spoken to. I thoroughly expect a revolving door at wide receiver in terms of the depth chart, and all the packages make it kind of iffy to really discuss it from that point of view as well. But there is a positive to it. Other teams aren't going to know where Florida State's going to line up guys, because I think even a guy like Ja'Kai Douglas, not the biggest guy, 5'9", 5'10", really speedy and quick, they might move him outside and play him behind Hakeem in a stack formation, run a screen, run a double pass, whatever. They have creativity in numerous ways, and then all the motions. They've got enough experienced guys like that. Deuce Spann could play multiple roles. Big guy that could play in the slot. He could play flanker. You're going to catch some teams by surprise. And it's that tight end room that I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. I think it's short on talent right now. They don't have enough experience. I think they need a transfer portal guy, and they need Landon Thomas to at least be adequate. Not to be dominant, adequate as a blocker to kind of get them to where they need to go. If they don't, it's going to be difficult to be a consistent passing game because, again, the run game is going to be obvious. When Kyle's in the game, they're going to have to run more. It's going to beat him up even more. They need to figure out the tight end room to maximize as an offense. The potential is there, though, and I think it's going to be one of the more intriguing things in college football as a storyline, Because if Florida State's passing game is good, I am sold that the running game will be good. We've talked about the running backs. I'm not going to go into them, but like Singleton is just like, he's 34th string. That's a really good running back. He's a kid I saw in high school. I knew he was good when he was a junior. I saw him live as a junior. If that's your third or fourth guy, you're in good shape. They have to get those tight ends ready to roll in the run game, get more of them, at least one in the portal, and then that passing game will flourish. So with that, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe. Make sure you share this podcast and comment. I would truly appreciate it. And if anything else, if you got a question or whatever, drop me a line on YouTube. I'd appreciate it. Everybody, have a great day.